Well, welcome into Bayou Roar on this episode. We're going to be previewing LSU's upcoming game against Texas A&M, as well as predicting all of the big Week 9 matchups. But I actually want to start by talking about some SEC baseball news. I know the baseball season is still a few months away, but the world of college baseball got a little shook up this weekend, or this week actually, in this SEC, especially with the news that Tony Vitello, the Tennessee baseball coach, has officially taken the job with the San Francisco Giants at the MLB. And then, of course, the Florida Gators coach is also going to be stepping aside for a little while to handle some personal matters. Now, don't know if for the Florida coach, if that means he'll be back by the start of the season or by the start of SEC play, or if it's just literally for the fall and then he'll rejoin them, before they get started up in maybe February, or whenever baseball season rolls around. Don't know about that, but that is definitely interesting right now as he's been the head coach over at Florida for a long time and he's obviously had a lot of success and look, if he's back by the start of the season, it may not impact them too much, but right now as they're doing fall ball, as they're doing, prep for the upcoming year, he definitely needs to be around as much as possible, and he's not getting those crucial moments in right now. So obviously, we'll see when he comes back kind of what the impact is there. But, that's obviously huge news. But of course, the biggest news is Tony Vitello leaving Tennessee. Look, Tony Vitello has been a super successful coach, whether you like him or not. I mean, he's won, I think I looked it up the other day just to see, he won 72% of his games at Tennessee. That is incredible. And by far the best, that any head coach for Tennessee has ever had in terms of that win percentage. The only one close was a coach they had in the 90s that got like 68% career winning percentage at Tennessee, but he never came anywhere like close, I believe, to winning a national championship. And of course, Vitello brought them a lot of success, a lot of SEC success, but also a national championship. And so he was a really, really good coach. I personally could not stand him or the style of baseball that his team played, but they played hard for him. They obviously loved him a lot, and they had a lot of success the last couple years. So obviously, that is going to be huge as we look forward to another baseball season here in a couple months, especially for the defending national champions in LSU baseball. But man, this season's already going to be lining up to be one just doozy of a season with, just now this is going to happen. We'll have to see if they potentially do anything to like allow Tennessee players to move or anything. I would doubt they would do it at this point, but who knows? The NCAA is changing transfer portal rules all the time for people. So don't know what's really going to happen as the fallout of that. But I know for Tennessee, here's the problem that you're going to have. Everybody's saying, oh, this, Vitello's leaving, but he left it in a great place or whatever, yada, yada, yada. It's hard to follow up a really good coach like that. It just is. You very, rarely find a guy that can step right into the shoes of the guy who had a lot of success right before them and do it really well, even if they've put the program in a really good position. So whoever goes and takes the Tennessee job next is definitely going to have a lot of work in front of them. But I'm also going to be interested to see like if even the players, are going to really want to stick around for the new guy because I just don't think they're going to put up with the same culture that Vitello put up with. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that all turns out, as we move along here. But we'll obviously talk about more about that as the baseball season comes about. That was just obviously some huge breaking news that's happened here recently. But we are in the middle of football season, so let's talk about this game on Saturday against A&M. And look, just, to come right out and say it as it is, this is a game where I don't necessarily know if I would put it at this point as a must win for LSU, but it's definitely a game that you better, by all means, play about your best game of the season. Win, lose, draw, whatever. You better put your best effort forward in this game on Saturday night, or things may be looking really differently come Sunday morning. because Texas A&M is good. I mean, they're ranked number 3 right now for a reason. I mean, they're undefeated. They've had a good year so far. By all means, if they go into this matchup on Saturday night and win the game, it's not like it's going to shock me by any means. But with that being said, if LSU goes into this one and once again just gets manhandled by Texas A&M for 4 quarters, not just a drive, not just a possession, whatever, but for 4 straight quarters, they just get dragged up and down the field defensively. They just get whipped offensively every single, time they're out there. Then I think come Sunday morning, you're going to start hearing a lot of stuff and you're going to start seeing a lot of stuff move. But if LSU wins, obviously that's a really good mark on your season that you at least beat A&M. And look, by that point, it's pretty much almost not safe to assume, but if you beat A&M Saturday night, the one kind of silver lining thing you could end up saying about this season is that you potentially could go undefeated at home for this year, which would be a good mark for sure, but not as impressive as it may have been when you were talking about this at the beginning of the year when South Carolina looked to be a lot better than what they ended up being. Arkansas is obviously not that great. Western Kentucky is obviously nothing to hang your hat on. So it wouldn't count for too much, but it would be some form of a silver lining if LSU was able to pull this one out on Saturday. Hey, at least you're potentially going to go undefeated at home for 2025, But with that being said, I think this game, if LSU loses, I mean, it might as well, like I said, just kind of be like hey, let's just get to the end of this thing, see what bowl game we go to, play in it, and just see what we can do to get ready for the next season. Because at this point, if you lose to A&M on Saturday, your season is for sure done. Doesn't matter if you go on the road and beat Bama after the bye week. Doesn't matter if you pull off a win at Oklahoma at the end of the year. Doesn't matter. With 3 losses on the season, it would be nearly impossible for you to chase after whatever goal that you have for the playoffs because, again, I think you're still losing to Bama, which would be a 4th loss, and at Oklahoma is a tough ask. So you're potentially talking about a 5th loss there, too. So winning this game on Saturday is crucial, but how are they going to do that? Well, defensively, I think if you had asked me a couple weeks ago if I felt like this defense could handle Marcel Reed and company this year, I would have said probably so because it just felt like this defense had improved so much. And even against Trinidad Chambliss, where they gave up some yards, it's like, okay, yes, he had a pretty good game, but it's hard to, like what stats do you really pay attention to when they're going up tempo? Your defense is playing 90 snaps, all those things. But now, after watching how they struggled to contain Pavia, after seeing how they kind of struggled to do certain things well, it makes me a little bit more nervous than before. Because here's the thing: this is a really talented receiving core that A&M has with Mario Craver and KC Concepcion. Like both of those guys are really, really good receivers. I don't like Marcel Reed as a quarterback personally throwing the football. I think that is a part of his game that he very much still has to develop. That ball flutters a lot. That ball kind of just doesn't always look pretty coming out of his hands. Like it's not always the best throws in the world from him. So like going up against this LSU secondary, like they're going to have their hands full with those 2 receivers, but I felt like this secondary and I still kind of do feel like this secondary will be tested this weekend for sure, but between DJ Pickett, PJ Woodland, and Mansour Delane, I feel like those guys can hang their hats and play really well against these guys, even if they are one of the better receiving cores you're going to find in the SEC. So I do feel like LSU's got some potential to continue to play really well defensively in terms of their secondary. I think what's going to be more of the issue is can you still play good run defense? Can you still play that stifling run defense that we saw for so much of this season? And that's the thing. I don't know if you can do that because last week, I mean, you really showed that you were struggling, against, that run offense with Diego Pavia and company. I mean, you struggled to stop the, kind of the broken play, broken down play creativity that Pavia was able to have. And look, Marcel Reed's going to be able to do that kind of stuff too. If a play breaks down, Marcel Reed's going to have the green light to go and run. I mean, that's what he does. That's what he destroyed you with last year when he checked in. So you're going into this one, and again, I think you can still put up a really strong performance in your secondary. But can you stop the run? I mean, the one good sign for this game is that, Le'Veon Moss, their very, very talented running back, who, you know, is a guy that I really was hoping LSU would go out and get, if he had ever, considered transferring to LSU because he's a Baton Rouge native and all those good things. But Le'Veon Moss will be out on Saturday, and he is the leading rusher for A&M. He is a very talented running back. He won't be playing, so that's an okay sign that maybe without their top rusher, maybe that will help a little bit. But Reuben Owens is a guy that can do pretty well from time to time. So Le'Veon Moss being out may be a big factor in this one for A&M's rushing attack. But when you've still got Marcel Reed, can you still play disciplined gap fundamentals for your rush lanes and shut them down? I don't know. I just don't know if you can do that yet. That is something that is still unproven, and that's what we're going to learn, I guess, in this game is whether or not this defense truly is just lost against the mobile quarterbacks and systems like this. So that will be a big thing for them on going into Saturday not having Lev Moss. But at the same time, again, you know, is that going to completely take them out of this one? No. Because their entire rushing attack is not just, Lev Moss taking a handoff up the middle. It's, run options and RPOs with Marcel Reed. So again, the threats are still there. Can you go in there and stop it? And the truth is I'm a little nervous about this game defensively for LSU because they're once again not going to have Whit Weeks. And say what you will about Whit Weeks, maybe he's not the fastest, maybe he's not the most explosive guy on the field, but he's the guy that he brings the energy, he brings the excitement, and he knows where everybody's supposed to be, and he can set everybody up the way they need to be set up. And without him for another game, I think it's just really, really difficult. Yes, you've got West Weeks and Harold Perkins and Devon Keys, and those guys all have a lot of talent, and those guys can be really, really good. Tyler Singleton's got a lot of talent. He can rotate in and play well, but it's just there's something about having your leader of the defense out again that's just really, really difficult. It's not necessarily Whit Weeks' playmaking as much as it is what's between the ears, what's going on, what he sees and what he can communicate to the defense. That's what they're going to miss, especially in a game with a really good, mobile threat like Marcel Reed. And so, I mean, the good news is it looks like Jamari Butler will be back to add to the defensive end rotation. He's really good, especially in run support, which will be nice to have him back. Looks like you'll have Bernard Gooden back. And although Bernard Gooden, in my mind, is a little bit of a better pass rusher defensive tackle than he is like a run defender defensive tackle, still having him is going to make a world of difference. Having him back and fully healthy, I think, is going to help them a lot. So there are some guys coming back that are healthier now that I think will boost the defense for sure more than where you were last week. But I still think without Whit Weeks, you're missing a lot of that heart that your defense has had pretty much all season long. And so that does make me a little bit nervous. But here's the thing with Bernard Gooden back, I mean, does that help your pass rush to where you can actually make Marcel Reed, you know, uncomfortable a little bit and force him into being just a pure passer the whole time? Can he put some pressure on him? Can you learn from what happened last week against Pavia? Maybe not go so hardcore rushing the ends or rushing Perk or whatever it may be, and actually just play more contained spy stuff. Let Gooden go chase after him, put some pressure on him, and turn him into a passer. Because if you can turn Marcel Reed into just a pure thrower all game long, you've got a really great chance. Because again, at this point, the one thing I still trust in, because at this point they've still proven they can do really good at what they're supposed to do, is Mansour Delane and DJ Pickett and PJ Woodland and AJ Halsey and Tamarcus Cooley. Cooley's had a little bit of some issues here and there, but I trust that secondary so much more than I do up front right now with all the injuries and things like that. So if you're telling me you can create an opportunity in a way for Marcel Reed just to have to throw the football the whole time, again, I don't think Marcel Reed is a great thrower of the football. I just don't. So if you force him to do that, you could have a very good shot at beating them on Saturday night. But again, if you still struggle with the very basic fundamentals of playing sound gap defense, watching your keys, watching where you're supposed to go, even without Lev Moss, even if the receivers get taken away, Marcel Reed can just run all over you. You're not going to have a good shot. You're just not going to have a good shot. You're not going to have a good chance, and you're going to end up losing. So, defensively, again, this is a mobile quarterback challenge. And look, Blake Baker has got to prove that he can do something against a mobile quarterback. At this point, if you are a not so mobile quarterback, you are a cooked goose against any Blake Baker defense. But if you have any form of mobility, that has seemed to be the one real Achilles heel with Baker's defense. And I don't think it's because Baker is just a bad defensive, coordinator. I think it's just because of his style. He's so aggressive. He dials up so many blitzes that, man, it's like if you can slip past that blitz, there's nobody left to stop you. So, again, it's not that Blake is just a bad DC. It's just I think he gets so, you know, just in his rhythm with what he's usually used to calling that sometimes those mobile quarterbacks can absolutely beat up this system. So, with that being said, defensively, I don't feel as confident as I have in the past, but I do think there are some potential ways for this defense to still come up big on Saturday and help you to a victory. But of course, that has to be complemented by the offense. And unfortunately, that's where, this gets a little bit tricky because on the one hand, this Aggies defense is, in my mind, been very interesting. It's like they've let some teams kind of hang around at times that I feel like they shouldn't. Like but at the same time, they make some big plays here and there. I don't think this A&M defense is like I got to be mindful here. I don't think they're as talented as they were last year. I think they are definitely, not terrible defensively. But, I mean, against Arkansas, the Aggies allowed for 268 rushing yards and gave up 527 total yards. There's been some opportunities in a lot of these games against the Aggies to have some offensive success. But again, will LSU's offense actually be able to do that? I don't know. Because last week I said, man, if you could get to a solid 100 rushing yards against a defense that had only been giving up 90, as long as Nuss had a pretty good day, I felt like you could win. Well, that didn't happen. You got 100 rushing yards. Nuss played fairly well. But because of a bad defensive day and because again your offensive line just kept getting whipped and you had to stall out on a few drives, it ended up not going your way. And at this point, man, it's just like I don't know what I can say about this offense anymore on what their keys to success can be because I don't know anything positive that they can do. I mean, Nuss could go out there and have the game of his life. And with this, the way this offensive line plays, I just don't know if that's going to be even good enough, you know? Because are you still going to be able to run the ball from time to time? Will they actually block? Now, I think the one good news that's coming out of kind of towards the end of this week right now is that we just literally learned on Thursday night that Carius Kern is going to be starting at left tackle because Tyree Adams had a tightrope procedure done on his ankle, and he'll be back now much, much later in the year. But they're skipping the DJ Chester experiment, thank goodness, and going with Carius Kern at left tackle. And again, Carius Kern is one of those guys that actually showed like he had some talent out there. So I'm excited that he's playing in this one. It'll be a big time game for him to get his, first start at left tackle at, but at the same time, you know, at least it's at home and not at Bama in a couple weeks. But with that all being said, I am encouraged that they're going to give Carius Kern this shot because I do think that this is a game where he could end up having a really nice performance and maybe the left side of the line gives you something to work with more than the right side, but I don't know. The problem is this whole offensive line has just not played well as a unit all year. And I just don't think it's going to get any better. And against an Aggie defense that has some good players on it still and can make some big plays happen when needed, they certainly have pretty good pass rush numbers from what I've seen. So, it's one of those things of even if Nuss just goes out there and he looks like he's zipping the ball around healthy, guys are catching the ball. I just don't know if this offense can really do enough to win. And it's sad that I say that, but it's just I really do think this is just going to be one of those gritty games, and I don't feel good about it to be completely honest. I really don't. I went into the year thinking that this would be a win for LSU just because I felt like again, at the beginning of the year, I felt like the offense would just be so good by this point. I felt like even if the offensive line was struggling a little bit, hopefully by this point, Nuss had gotten in a groove with the new receivers. They were getting some, good rushing here and there, but that's not happened. And look, maybe LSU surprises everybody on Saturday night and they have their best offensive game of the year. They might do it. But even if that happens, I don't think it'll be enough to convince me fully that this team can go on and do anything of any significance moving forward when it comes to, you know, throwing the football and all those good things. So, with all that being said, what is the score going to be? This really hurts, me because again, this was one that I had predicted as a win before the season started. I think the line is actually 2.5 for A&M, which is a little surprising considering again how bad LSU looked last week. The ESPN predictor thing or whatever actually almost has it as a close split. I believe the last time I checked it was almost like 50-50 on the nose of what they thought. Look at it again. It's 52% A&M. So I mean it's very, very tight. A lot of people could see this going either way. However, as I've said before, it's one of those things until you can prove it to me. I cannot give you something that I have not seen. I have not seen this team get into the offensive rhythm it's really needed to get into. I have not seen this team play a game where on both sides of the ball they show up on a Saturday. Like I mentioned last week, the offense showed up and the defense had their first game all year where they did not show up. In every other game, the defense has shown up and the offense hasn't shown up, or even if it has, it was barely showing up. So at the end of the day, I'm picking Texas A&M to win. I don't know if I necessarily have a score in mind because again, this LSU offense is just unpredictable and they're probably not going to score more than like 24 anyways. But again, until they can go out and prove to me that they can play physical football again, that they can do what they need to do, I can't trust to pick LSU right now against a team that's really playing well, having a nice season. And even with some key injuries, I think they have a safety that's going to be out. Le'Veon Moss is going to be out. At this point, A&M's just got an identity, and they're playing really well for their coach right now. And I think going into Saturday night, they're just going to be able to roll in there and win. So, and again, even in a loss, if LSU's competitive, they're fighting hard. If they show us some fight, at least I know moral victories don't count for anything, but better than losing to Vanderbilt last week and looking like you had no idea what you were doing out there on the field. At least that would be better than just losing like that. But I think either way, Sunday if it's a loss, like I said to A&M, I think you're gonna start hearing some things, seeing some things go into motion. But all that being said, I do have A&M winning this one in Baton Rouge and effectively ending LSU's college football playoff hopes for the season if they weren't already dead in the water. But there are still a few games in week 9 that I'm also going to be watching, and so I'm going to share those with you all. So, in terms of like big matchups, week 9 does not have a ton of those. There's really only two like ranked games that I'm really looking into. But there's three games overall in week 9 that I am keeping my eye on. And obviously, the first one is Ole Miss versus Oklahoma. So Ole Miss is going to Oklahoma this weekend, coming off the loss on the road to Georgia. And Oklahoma is a 5.5 point favorite. Now, the interesting thing is, of course, Oklahoma has had a weird season where they looked pretty good. Then John Mateer got hurt. Then, of course, Mateer comes back against Texas. They look awful. And then they get beat down in the Red River rivalry. And then they, recover or whatever a little bit last week. But it's still one of those things of people were wondering a lot about Oklahoma. And then, of course, Ole Miss was all hyped up going into that Georgia game. Everybody thought Ole Miss was this big time, and they played Georgia tight, but at the end of the day, Georgia was able to win because, again, I feel like Ole Miss is not quite the superpower everybody assumes them to be. They beat LSU, and while that was a big win for them, and we tip our caps to them for that, Ole Miss, as I've mentioned before, I feel like is a team that everybody's all hyped up on, but I don't think they are deserving of that hype. Their defense has a lot of holes in it. I mean, a ton. Their defense is filled with guys that just are not really that good. They've got a couple of nice players on the defensive side of the football, but not enough to really hang in there with the best of the best. And look, Oklahoma, I know, has also had their ups and downs, but I think we got to remember. I mean, John Mateer's first game back from a thumb injury on his throwing hand was against Texas, and not saying that that's really an excuse. You chose to go out there to play, and if were injured, then you shouldn't have played in that game or whatever. But when he was healthier again, and he looked a lot healthier last week, felt like things went a little bit more in favor of Oklahoma. So entering this game on Saturday, here's the thing. I think Oklahoma is a team that is in a much better position overall than Ole Miss. I think Brent Venables has a pretty good defense behind him right now at Oklahoma. I think he's a pretty good defensive mind. And look, the Kiffin offense is one of the toughest offenses to slow down in college football. I mean, the unpredictability of it, the tempo of it is really hard. But this game is at Oklahoma. John Mateer is, by all means healthy, the healthiest he's been since coming back from the thumb injury. I think Oklahoma wins this game on Saturday. I do, and hands Ole Miss their next loss. Now, here's the sucky thing: if you're rooting for Ole Miss now to get out of the playoff conversation, I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen, even with a loss on Saturday to Oklahoma, because what are their two losses going to be? Georgia and potentially Oklahoma, and then the rest of their schedule is a cakewalk, basically, unless Mississippi State can come up with an upset in the Egg Bowl. So Ole Miss still has very much a chance to end up being like 10-2 at the end of the year, which just really, really stinks because I don't think this is really a playoff worthy team, but I think they may walk their way into it because of the way their schedule just has fallen this year. So, yeah. Anyways, I have Oklahoma beating Ole Miss, and now the second game I've got to watch is Missouri and Vanderbilt, where Vanderbilt is a 2.5 point favorite. Now, of course, Vanderbilt last week, I think Vanderbilt is a good team. I think they are a pretty well balanced team. They're very physical. They're very, very tough. Pavia is a very good quarterback. Missouri, though, also has, though, a very strong and tough identity like Vanderbilt. They like to run the ball too. This is going to be a game where, honestly, I don't know if we're going to see a whole lot of points in this one because I think you got two teams that want to run the ball. That is their main strength going up against each other. It may not be a high scoring affair. It just might not be. But here's the thing. I think Missouri's got a pretty tough defense. And the thing is say what you will, Missouri brought a lot of physicality against Alabama when they played a couple weeks ago. That was a team that I watched, fight with Alabama really, really hard and kept up with them the entirety of that game. And not that Vanderbilt played poorly against Alabama themselves, but eventually Alabama kind of took that will over, towards the end. I think this Missouri defense is really, really solid. I think they're very, very physical. And I think what Vanderbilt was able to take advantage of LSU last week, which was a defense that was not physical, was not hitting them hard, was not playing the way that they should have played. Vanderbilt took advantage of that and ended up winning the ball game. I don't think they're going to have that same advantage over Missouri. And considering Missouri's also got some pretty good running backs, they've got a good offensive system under Drinkwitz. This is not me having sour grapes about Vanderbilt. Again, I think Vanderbilt is a very, very good team. They're a 2.5 point favorite, but I'm actually going to go with Missouri because I just wonder, did Vanderbilt also put all their eggs in the basket to go beat LSU last week? Because from the way everybody talked it up, from the way that everybody was hyping up that game last week, I saw more people talking about that Vanderbilt team last week than I did all year long. I'm not saying it was their Super Bowl by any means. I'm not saying it was like what they considered to be their biggest game of the year, but it felt like all of the attention was on them last year to go in there and pull off the quote unquote upset of LSU. It felt like they really lived up to that moment. But the problem is now you got to come back down and play Missouri again this week, a team that has your same level of physicality, that wants to run the ball, do all these things, like I said. And I think the difference will be Vanderbilt is going up against a team that will match them physicality wise. And I think Missouri will end up edging this one out. So I got Missouri beating Vanderbilt on Saturday, which may be a bold prediction, but I got them doing it. And then my interesting game of the week to keep your eye on is Texas going on the road to play Mississippi State. Right now, Texas is a 7 point favorite, but this is a Texas team that is, I mean, they are struggling. They struggled with Kentucky last week. I don't know what's going on over there in Austin right now, but they are. I mean, at just that, not an all-time low, but they're definitely not at the level we all thought they were going to be at. And the thing with Mississippi State is Mississippi State has been so just close all season to pulling off an SEC win. They have had so many great moments this year. They've been playing so much better. And I'm not going to give a prediction, but man, Mississippi State's got a real good chance in this one on Saturday to maybe get their first SEC win in a long, long time. And I would honestly love to see it because I think that could be something that is really fun for the SEC to see, Mississippi State, Cowbells going crazy, pulling off a huge win. So I am excited to keep my eye on that one because I want to see if the Bulldogs can get it done. And honestly, if they could beat Texas, not only would that be a great sign for Mississippi State as a program overall, maybe they'll have a chance to beat more. I mean, I could see them beating Arkansas. Who knows? Maybe if they play well enough, a trap game for Ole Miss at the end of the year in Starkville for the Egg Bowl. Who knows? But I think how they perform in this one against Texas on Saturday will kind of reveal kind of where their mindset's going to be at for the rest of their season. So I'm keeping an eye on that one. But again, that's pretty much everything for week 9. We'll see how it all plays out. But LSU, of course, playing on Saturday night in Death Valley against the Aggies. No matter what happens, LSU is still my team. They're still my program. Just like I know for many of you, they are as well. And so I'll be watching it for sure. And I hope you guys have a great weekend watching college football. Hope you guys soak it all in. Just enjoy every second of it. And hey, as always, let's go Tigers.